In the Loop. We're here to discuss the ups, downs, and sideways of the sport of figure skating and maybe give you +5 GOE along the way. Let's introduce this week's hosts.
Hi, I'm Gina. I literally feel like a bear coming out of hibernation for this figure skating season. You can find me on Twitter at 48Twizzles.
Hi, I'm Lay. I can smell the chaos of this skating season in the air and I'm not sure if I'm ready. I'm on Twitter at Axel Sandwich.
Hi, I'm Carly, and I'm crying over seeing all my kids debut all their new programs this Challenger series. You can find me on Twitter at CyberswanSP.
Okay, so the focus of this episode is on several key topics relating to early season because we are finally starting the senior season and already halfway through our Challenger events. So at the time of recording, we've had Autumn Classic, Lombardia Trophy, the Nepela Memorial Cup, US Classic, and Nebelhorn, which is happening as we're recording at this moment in time.
So many.
I feel like I'm already drowning under like all the competitions and it's barely started.
When there were 3 competitions the weekend of Autumn Classic and I was there and I was just like dying.
Yeah, whoever scheduled these events along with the JGP was just, I don't think they had a choice, but I still disagree with their decisions.
I'd like to have a talk with you, please.
So unfortunately, we won't be able to cover obviously all the skaters across all these competitions in this one episode, but we will be focusing on key themes coming through at this stage in the season.
Okay, so a little bit about the Challenger series. They are Senior B competitions. They are official ISU events. The scores count. Any world records, if we have them, count.
And we do.
And we do.
We sure do.
Generally, it's a good chance for top skaters to get some competition experience before the Grand Prix series starts. And it's a bit of a preview for the season to come.
It's also, as we mentioned, you can earn world standing points. And judges can practice judging, which, did they actually do? We'll get to that.
Oh boy, they need it!
Things will be ranted about.
So challengers are really exciting, usually because it's the debut of lots of upcoming juniors and lots of returns, like you can see how someone's in shape or you can see their new programs. It's just fun.
Yeah, it's like a little reveal.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, oh, let's start the season. Like, how you doing? Like, fill out this test.
We're back.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into some of these program selections. Since it is the second season post-Olympics, this is generally a good time to either experiment with your image or solidify a reputation with consistency. So, if you had a breakout season last year, maybe you want to do something similar, or maybe you want to do something wild and crazy and just make everyone really confused.
Did happen.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, though, let's address a slightly awkward elephant in the room, which is that for some reason it seems like cultural appropriation is kind of a low-key theme in a lot of the programs happening this year. We are planning an episode about this, and we do think it's a complicated issue, and sort of discourse on Twitter is not necessarily the right medium for nuance. But there are sort of an unusually high number of programs this season that seem to kind of be drawing on elements from foreign cultures to the skaters who are skating them. And so we'd love to talk about that. But do hang on because another episode's coming for that one.
Yeah, so we're going to start off with skaters who have picked really different program styles than what they're used to. So are they challenging themselves? Is it a good idea? Are they established and really breaking the mold? So we have a couple Japanese skaters that are going for different or more contemporary programs compared to last year. Starting off with Rika, both her short program and her free skate are pretty out of the box.
Yeah, I think they're super ambitious and kind of like offbeat, her short program especially. Which I do appreciate in some senses. She does manage to make kind of a range of movements work for her in terms of the choreography, but I do think they are difficult programs to interpret and do incorporate kind of a lot of elements of chanting and things that seem to be drawn from Middle Eastern, Indian, Hindu influences. So yeah, it's quite an unusual route to take considering the breakout season she had last year and how many eyes are on her. But I think it's interesting that she's kind of gone slightly non-traditional in her approach and hasn't just gone for like a safe warhorse program or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I think especially since it's only her second senior season.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how the program grows and whether she can kind of really settle into it.
Another skater with some very different programs this season is Satoko. Her short program has hip-hop elements, which is such a drastic departure from her typical programs, and as is her unexpected coaching change to focus on her technical elements.
Yeah, she's just suddenly upped and left to Canada, so...
That was so surprising. Like, I woke up one day and Satoko was in Canada.
Yeah, I can't say I see the program working for her yet, but I actually really like the hip-hop breakdown section. Like, I think Satoko has kind of worked herself into a place where she sort of hit the GOE ceiling on most of her other elements, other than her jumps, and it feels increasingly like she's getting kind of a PC's tax every year that her elements don't improve. So I do think that she's made some drastically different choices in a reflection of kind of the general way that her scores are going. So I still think it'll be a huge challenge to see if she can kind of change her usual like super refined, considered and careful skating style to kind of match the wildness that you need to kind of make the hip-hop vibe work. But yeah, I think the short program is interesting in that sense. Choreographically, some other elements we'll be talking about in our cultural appropriation episode. But if we strip all of that conversation and save it for next time, I think it'll be an interesting program for her.
Yeah, the short program is a little bit yikes, as is the free skate. For the short program, I found the hip hop part pretty rad. It's very different kind of style of movement than what she usually brings, and I appreciate that. I don't know if I buy Satoko being aggressive, but I suppose if she thinks about worlds enough, she can
drop her rap album.
The choreo elsewhere is a little bit cringe, good God.
Please no hands, ever. Can we just cancel hands? Egyptian hands, please don't.
Yeah, hands are cancelled this season.
So Anna Sherbakova certainly took her senior debut by storm. She landed a ratified quadruple Lutz. I think Anna, she has such a lightness to her skating, and honestly, to her eternal credit, makes all her other jumps seem really easy by comparison. I personally don't know if the gravitas of her music suits her particularly because of that lightness that she has to her. She just seems so delicate that I don't know if she kind of has the pathos of, especially her short program, I guess, with Perfume, which is a very dark movie. I don't know if she's got that in her performance yet, but obviously early season, and she is 15.
You know what she does have? A rad costume change.
That was very good. And yeah, I thought that was so novel. And then I was like, you just rarely see that in, I guess, at the top echelons, I guess, of the contenders in senior competition. So I thought it was a great touch, until then I saw that they had also made Sasha Trusova also do a costume change, and then I was like, I swear to God, if Aliona turns into a sparkly bat midway through her program next competition,
I hope she does.
I will have words with Daniil and Eteri's team. But no, it was, when it happened, it was kind of a little gasp moment, and I love that it was incorporated into the choreography. So we do, unfortunately, have to talk a little bit about said quad Lutz. So this is definitely not Anna's problem alone. But yeah, the unfortunate issue plaguing the ladies attempting quad Lutzes is pre-rotation. So if you do look at the jump in slow motion, you do see that the toe pick actually leaves the ice almost as they're facing forward on the Lutz. But since technical controllers are only able to look at a takeoff in real time, they're just not being called at the moment. So this is not unusual with the quad Lutz in all the ladies who've tried it, but I just feel like it has to be talked about.
There needs to be some kind of consistent, sensible way for tech panels to determine and correctly call rotations in the air versus on the ice. If your on ice rotation is more than 180 degrees, you need to get an under rotation call. And this is the sort of feedback that would actually benefit the skaters.
I don't know. I feel like it's hit the stage where this is just like the accepted technique now. There's a part of me that just feels that if you're calling rotations, it doesn't make sense to only start counting the circle from like someone jumping half of it on the ground and then only counting it from the landing. If there's something wrong with the takeoff, it's like starting a race on different starting lines. So for me personally, I just think like it's not officially entrenched in the rules, but from just a logical perspective, I just don't feel like it makes sense to not consider pre-rotation when it comes to counting rotations. Let's talk about Sasha Trusova, the junior world champion, who has finally rewritten Evgenia Medvedeva's free skate world record in her senior debut, which is actually quite shocking to consider. So yes, Sasha got 163.79 in the free skate with a pop and 65 PCs, which is on par with her junior worlds PCs actually, which is also bound to rise if she's consistent. So she had a fully ratified quadruple lutz and quadruple toe. And yeah, this is the current quad age and this is the pioneer for it. I think undoubtedly like her jumps are amazing. Her triple lutz, triple low gets a lot of lift, and her quadruple toe is probably the best of all the quads jumped by ladies so far.
How did 3 landed quads only break the historic record by like 3 points?
There was some mad inflation happening in that competition. Yeah, so I do really low-key adore the excerpt of In the Hall of the Mountain King part of Sasha's short program because it's literally the music that plays in my head whenever she skates. And I think probably in the minds of like everyone else watching her skate. So it's wonderful and very fitting. I'd love to see her be a bit more playful with her interpretation on this one because like despite the repetition of this segment, I think there's such a build up in the music. Like it goes from soft to just chaotic and threatening. And I just think she can really make that explode a bit more. So I'd love to see her work on that element of her program. That being said, I have such just so much sadness about the cut that they chose to do for her Game of Thrones free skate program. Like, I just cannot believe that you come to like Game of Thrones, which is just the perfect kind of vibe and program for a tiny girl who's about to burn the entire world down, and you pick the 2 like sleepiest, most boring parts of that entire epic soundtrack. Like, there are so many questionable choices made in this for me. Like, I don't understand why you would choose cuts that would make it so unrecognizable as a Game of Thrones program.
I seriously would have taken the theme over this.
Yeah, like Paul Fence. Justice for Paul Fence being a groundbreaker. And like, she could have just taken his music, honestly. It was great. But yeah, even choreography choices just had me a little bit confused. There was sort of a bestie squat in the quiet point in the music, and I was like, why is that there? What is it highlighting? I'm not sure. I don't know. I just don't understand why you would choose something that would sound like any other program. Like, there were definitely parts that sounded a bit like Aliona's Departure's short program for me, and I was just... yeah, I'm just sad.
Honestly, talking about that score, if she goes fully clean, like, because she had a pop, and then if her PCs rise, as they probably will with consistency, she could possibly break 170 in the free, which would be an entire 10 points above the previous highest ladies score before this season. It would kind of be historic.
In the Hall of the Mountain King, just kind of gonna play just right here.
Threateningly in my head.
Let's move on quickly to Kazuki Tomono's short program. Where do we begin with Kazuki Tomono's short program? It's high art, it's impossible to understand, and it is amazing, but also so confusing. It is based on a contemporary ballet adaptation of the White Stripes song, The Hardest Button to Button. And I believe that ballet is by Wayne McGregor and it's called Chroma. So you can actually find a performance of Chroma on YouTube if you look it up. So I definitely do recommend that because it kind of explains some of the choreography after watching it, but not all. of the choreography.
I'm going to be the Kazuki Tomono Defense Squad. I actually really like this short program. The only thing I don't like is the little bits where he's kind of standing in one spot and just kind of doing weird-ass poses.
You didn't like the knee wobble?
You know what? The knee wobble can stay if he does it moving forwards. I don't like choreography where you just stood in one spot. I would prefer all of that stuff if it was in movement. That's my only thing. The only bit where he did stop and did a pose and then moved again that I liked was in the step sequence because it was part of a directional change. And I thought that was rad. But yeah, the standing in one space and just posing really doesn't do it for me.
The thing about this program is that you will never forget the experience of watching it for the first time.
Yeah, so me and Yogita were in line for Autumn Classic, like lining up outside, and it was like 6 a.m. and Evie was like, you gotta watch Kazuki's short program. So we turned it on and we were just like losing our minds at 6 a.m. It's such an incredibly strange choice, but it's like so memorable. And honestly, like, it's not that he can pull it off, but he's charming. Like, you watch it and you're just like, yeah, go funky. Go be funky.
It's true.
Yeah, he's charming enough to make me like West Side Story, so...
Yes, but please change your short program costume, I beg you, Kazuki.
He looks like ham that's been dropped in mud. I don't...
I don't know. I'm always going to be here for a, like, costume that isn't a freaking dress shirt and some black pants. But I do think that when you have a program that is so chaotic and striking and just there's so much going on in this program and in the music and it's so aggressive, that this is actually a time where I think he probably could have gotten away with just a simple, like, black turtleneck or, you know, anything, even something like what the Chroma ballet dancers were wearing, which is just very neutral, skin-tight clothing. That probably would have helped show off his extensions and his lines a little bit more.
I thought you said skin tone, and I was like, oh god, no.
No. Don't be one, like, blob of beige on the ice, please. Okay, and speaking of chaotic suns and short programs, we also have Denis Vasilyevs, who, after skating at Nepela, made a surprise announcement that he is skating 2 short programs this season.
Which one are you gonna get? You never know.
I don't know. It's like the lucky bag of programs.
He's giving us the excitement this season.
So I think with Denis, he's got a solid grasp on performance aspects. But I would love to see that focus now shift to his tech. It's great to see that he's kind of got a solid lock on his spins and like his skating in general, but definitely feels like at this point in time, it'd be great to see him kind of focusing on getting that triple axel, getting like a quad, maybe.
We can only hope.
Please, Denis, please.
Me at Denis and Jason, please just get that freaking quad. So, like, as for the 2 short program situation, it's fun, it's chaotic, like, you don't know what you're gonna get. He's just gonna perform on a whim, but, like, it just concerns me because, like, the season overall is meant to build up your programs and get experience with performing them and doing the choreography and, like, you know, refining them. And if he's doing 2 and that he doesn't really have a set plan for what he's doing when, he's not going to get those chances to refine it and make it better. But I mean, you're changing the game. Go off. Love you.
Yeah, alternating with short programs, Jesus. I would love to see how he chooses which one he's going to do. Like, is he going to flip a coin? Yeah, I guess this is just the season of chaotic men.
And then finally, we have Olivia Smart and Adrienne Diaz's free dance, which can only be described as the clown program. It's definitely trying to be memorable and entertaining, but I just think perhaps there's such thing as being a little too literal.
Because I heard people talking about this program and I watched it, and like halfway through I was like, hey, this isn't that bad. And then the clowns came back and I'm just like, it doesn't even make sense. sense.
The
It's
return of the clowns.
Why did they need to come back? I'm trying to figure out the story of this program. Like, I feel like I need to take LSD to follow the journey. It's like two programs mishmashed together. They don't make sense together.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like, it was memorable, but not in a good way. Yeah, Gina, you're right. It's like two different programs. Like, it starts out with clown circus music, which, like, isn't that bad, but then it goes to, like, emotional voiceovers and some rain sounds, and then some dramatic music, and then it goes back to the circus. It is memorable, but that's because it's jarring.
Let's move on to skaters who are, instead of giving us something different, are picking similar styles to what's worked before and solidifying a brand.
So perhaps the most distinctive example of this is maybe Kevin Amos. So he had kind of made his mark with a really fierce upbeat short program and a soft, like gentle, artistic free skate that created contrast to showcase his range last season. And I think he's like kind of more or less stuck to a similar kind of contrast this season. I just think he sells the two styles super well. I love that he's got the Jay-Z slide and that insane like layback leggy extension thingy that he does like at the beginning of the program, which I think he's just quickly establishing a bunch of elements as his brand, and I think that's super admirable considering like he really had a breakout last season and it's already kind of so memorable and distinctive to him. And I think his upswing in PCs is interesting. The Euros crown is definitely empty right now, so it'll be really interesting to see if he can capitalize on that.
I think his PCS is well earned, particularly in performance and interpretation. He uses the ice really well and really stands out for being able to use the music. My mum watched ACI Men's out of obligation because she knows that I love Yuzuru and wanted to see, and she loved Kevin. She knows absolutely nothing about figure skating, but she liked Kev. Kev.
Casual first name basis.
Yeah, we're mates now. Even though the short program is very on brand, I do think it avoids being repetitive from his previous programs, especially because he does seem to bring in different movements or different kind of tweaks on moves in the field that he's done before.
I think his PCS definitely has been underrated so far. I probably wouldn't have it be on par with Yuzuru's in skating skills, transitions, or choreography, though. I think there's still definitely a difference in the seamlessness of how the jump is incorporated into the transition, and definitely a couple of blank spots, especially after jump exits for Kevin, where it feels like he's kind of just transitioning between the elements. But I definitely endorse the existence of transitions in general. He's probably above most of the senior men in that sense. And I love his entry into the loop, which is straight out of the Kaori Sakamoto school of loop entries.
Right on. Everyone learned from Kaori. Yeah, both of his programs, as we mentioned, are definitely in a similar vein to last year's. I would say the short program is like different enough for me. It's upbeat, but Horns was more like a rock upbeat, and this is more of like, the Prince pop upbeat. So like, I just appreciate that it's consistent, but still a change. I just really enjoyed the short program. As for the free program, it's still a little similar, in my opinion. Not that I don't like it, I love it, but I would just like to see him in the future seasons branch out a bit more now that he's made a name for himself.
Speaking of, we have also Fear and Gibson, our disco Brits from last season. We're definitely seeing that they're trying to live up to that reputation with both their programs this season.
Yeah, I rather like their rhythm dance, which I think is also pretty on brand for being very upbeat and high energy. It's also got that nice nostalgic feel, which I like. I like that choice of music. The free dance, I find the music cuts a little bit strange. The switch back from like a prayer to Vogue struck out as being quite awkward for me, but overall the program is enjoyable. They're clearly wanting to keep up the brand from the disco free dance last season, but I don't know how sold I am on the Madonna yet.
I like that both of their programs are fun and upbeat, and yeah, they're definitely trying to solidify that brand that the disco free dance gave them of, you know, fun and like not really quirky, but like enjoying themselves. Like they really set a theme for themselves with the disco free, which was great. I think it would be nice in future seasons for them to show a little bit of different sides between the rhythm dance and free dance. Although I do love both programs. The free dance, I love Madonna, so I think like since they just performed it like for the first time, it needs a little polish. But I respect that Gina, like, it isn't, like, perfect, but I just enjoy Madonna. With the slow, like a prayer breakdown, I also didn't like it that much, but I understood why they wanted a slower part. Also, the, like, camera shutter noises in the beginning of Vogue just, like, threw me off, because I thought it was someone, like, taking pictures right next to me in the ring.
Love it.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything about the free dance I dislike. I think they'll definitely build momentum with it through the season, and I'll look forward to that.
We're going to talk a bit about recycled programs now, because Yuzuru Hanyu recycled both of them.
Yay! What a shock.
Yes.
Yeah, Otoniel and Origin, he recycled them to upgrade his tech, and because, to be fair, he only skated them like 4 times last season.
Yeah. I think there was definitely like an expectation at the end of last season that there would be a possibility of recycling. And I think like in some ways, the smaller details that you see in the programs and in his performance at Autumn Classic really sort of highlight the advantage of recycling, because it does feel like a complete program, obviously from the very start of the season. And distinctly different to last year's Autumn Classic, he had zero chill going into this entire competition.
When does he ever?
Yeah, I think there was definitely several news articles that I translated about him trying the quintuple toe loop and quintuple sal freaking in harness in order to try and land his quad axel.
Say that fast 5 times.
Quintuple toe loop. What the heck? I think my entire mouth and being is just rebelling against the entire concept.
Yeah, exactly. Your mouth is just like, I don't want to say it.
Yes, not this concept. So yes, and obviously another advantage was that Yuzuru landed all 4 quads in his free skate at the start of the season in his first challenger competition, which is great, and I'd like him to keep this no pop energy going. And my other question is whether he needs to juggle knives for the judges to give him +5 GOE on his triple axel, because I really didn't understand what they needed from him in his short program on that.
It's like, his triple axel is like, it's a thing of beauty, and it's like, it's there. It's like, give them the 5 out of 5.
There was a twizzle entry, a twizzle exit, there was good height, good distance. He landed well. He even said, I think himself, which Yuzuru rarely does, but he said that triple axel was probably the closest to his ideal. And I'm like, if Yuzuru Hanyu is saying that that's his ideal, what else do you need?
Like, does he have to throw glitter at the same time as he jumps? I don't understand what they need from him.
I think there is definitely some controversy always when a top skater does recycle, but I think something that must be pointed out with a lot of Yuzuru's programs when he recycles, which he is no stranger to, is that he does tend to evolve them over the off-season and also during the course of the season. So I think you can really see that a little bit more in Origin than Autumnal, I think. There are just little touches that he's brought back. The violin playing in the middle of his spread eagle. I think it's fairly, like, it's just interesting. And from a strategic standpoint, definitely a good decision considering his state at the end of last season.
Yeah, I mean, people tend to be really snarky about program reuse, but it comes down to what's more effective to each skater. And Yuzuru does need a little bit more time with his programs, not because he's slow at learning choreography, but because there's more choreography for him to perfect than maybe some other skaters who change their programs every season. Partly because Yuzuru just is really not very good at filling empty spaces. Some skaters can have those moments where they're just doing the crossovers or whatever, and they make it look very full, but Yuzuru's not very good at doing that, and that's something that I really realised last season, watching Origin in particular, is that he's not very good at filling those kind of emptier spaces in the programme. He likes to have stuff to do.
I feel that.
I think when it's not choreographed as fully and when it's not corresponding to every single bit of the musical notes, there are times, I think especially the part before he does that layback with his arms like spread out, where he's going through a series of like really difficult, I think, steps and turns, but that part still feels a little bit bare to me. I don't know if it's just sort of the relaxed way he's using his arms there or something, but it'll be interesting to see if that stays. And I'd also, I guess, add that it does take time to get back your jumps. So he is trying for a quad lutz and a quad loop after injuring himself on both those jumps. And he does have complex transitions going in and out of his jumps. So definitely there's a lot for him to do. And I think it's easy to kind of discount how much work it takes to learn and internalize new choreography while juggling all of those new elements. So despite the fact that you might look at his program repertoire and think, oh, like, you know, it's the same programs, it really isn't when you actually look at the program layout and what changes he's actually making to them.
Yeah, I honestly like kind of have grown to appreciate his recycling because like it's just because he wants to improve himself and like make it up to his standards. So I really appreciate that like dedication to performing it to what he thinks its full extent is.
Yeah, I mean, he's a perfectionist. And when you look at, say, Chopin, can you really say he was wrong to use that 3 times? No.
But yeah, so I think he's unusual in his attitude to recycling, but I definitely think that it's worth noting that recycling is not simply a matter of using the same music. A program can be very, very different despite being skated to the same music, just as programs skated to different music could actually, in fact, be the same if you look at it very carefully. So speaking of recycling, Conrad Orzel, who is also a TCC skater, made his debut at Autumn Classic as well. And he's also recycling his short program from his last junior season, which is called In My Blood by Shawn Mendes.
Yeah, about that, I thought it was like a good program for him, or a good choice for him to recycle. I quite like the program, despite that he has about one facial expression throughout the whole thing.
Luckily for Conrad, it's a nice facial expression.
He's got a nice face. Got that going for him.
It's a good face. It's interesting to me to recycle a program going into its senior debut because it just seems like the perfect time to like make a statement with new programs. But then again, he's also more playing it safe and doing something he's comfortable with that he's already performed. And then he knows the choreography well. So it's kind of like it could go either way.
Yeah, but I think there's definitely a comfort level associated with, you know, staying at least with one program that you know well so that at least you can concentrate, I guess, on the new one and making that work well.
It is also quite demanding to go up to seniors because a lot of juniors will see that as an opportunity to improve their technical content. But they do also have to kind of get out of the habit of being junior-ish in their presentation, and I think that would be a good reason to keep a program so that you can kind of mature it.
Mm-hmm.
Like cheese.
A good program is like cheese.
Yes, it needs time and loving care.
Okay, anyway, back to Conrad. It was a good like performance pre his first Grand Prix, which is NHK. His free program, it was nice. It wasn't memorable. I mean, but it's early in the season, so.
Yeah, I think he's got room to mature like cheese in his engagement and projection, and those parts of figure skating are difficult. I'm not personally all that bothered about facial expressions being kind of static when skaters are skating. It does help your engagement if you are kind of doing the face thing as well as the body thing. But as an audience member, it doesn't really bother me that much because if you are in the venue and you're in the seats, you can't see the faces anyway. Or maybe I just have bad eyesight.
No, you have a good point.
Bit of both. I think for me, the majority of skating audiences still do watch skating on TV and broadcast. So I do place a premium on facial expressions. But I guess for me, it's more a case where like a skater that does have a really great expressive performative quality in their face and is truly feeling the program really elevates it to something more for me. So I think it's not unusual especially for junior skaters making their debut into seniors, for them to struggle a little bit with that because, skating a program, it's very, very easy to kind of forget your face and just be concentrating on elements. So for me, it's actually I think of it as a final frontier in really making a program shine in its interpretation and performance. So he's definitely not unusual in being someone who probably needs to work on that a little bit. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that for me I look out for and what really draws me into my favorite skaters.
Going back to recycling, he's not the only one recycling a program into his senior debut. Alyona Kostanaya of Russia is also, but she hasn't performed it at a challenger yet. She's only performed it at Russian test skates.
She was an example of the skater being injured, so I do wonder, sometimes that might be the reason for also keeping and recycling a short program. So, but yeah, she has a new free skate, which we will see very soon.
It's Twilight!
It's Twilight. Cool. So finally, let's move on to just a quick discussion on the importance of results at this point in the season. So naturally, something that you sort of wonder is whether these results are a good indication of how the season will pan out. And I think based on past precedents, it's very difficult to determine form and performance for the skaters based on previous competitions because ice is slippery and anything can kind of happen in between one competition and another. But I do think that it's increasingly possible to note trends in the judging from early season, and that includes the challenges. So I think it's also super important to keep reminding ourselves. I think there's this I think when I joined figure skating fandom, I got the immediate impression that people didn't really take challenges that seriously. It was kind of like, it's early season, don't worry, it's, challenger scoring is fake and it doesn't really matter and it doesn't affect how the GPs pan out. And it took me a while to realize how weird that sounded because honestly, challenges are judged by judges who are official ISU judges. And you'll see many of them in GPs. So I genuinely don't really understand why it feels like in some corners of the fandom and in the general community that it's sort of regarded differently to any other kind of official competition. But yeah, I think it's important to take note of the judging. So I think the first key topic that we kind of have to address in the room is not something new by any means. We've been talking about this all last season, intermittently throughout the podcast, but it is the tech panel and its consistency. There's a really good video on tech calls and on what tech callers can and can't review on YouTube by a fan that we'll link in the transcript. But essentially, they can't review takeoffs in slow motion, only at regular speed. And also, apparently, tech panels can counter jumps landing either from the moment the toe pick hits the ground, whereas other judges might call it from when the weight actually fully transfers to the blade, which could potentially explain why there have been so many inconsistencies across the tech panels. But it, A, doesn't mean that pre-rotation doesn't exist, and B, doesn't really excuse the fact that inconsistency in tech panels happens not just across competitions, but even within competitions between skaters.
Yeah, if there's different metrics for counting when it becomes under rotation or when the rotation is being finished on the ice, maybe clarify that?
Maybe just have a sentence in your rulebook explaining it. The other trend that I've noticed a little bit, which has been an issue for several seasons now, but I just think it's so fascinating, especially in ladies, that lutzes are hardly ever called, but you will see a flip call, with a startling degree of kind of regularity and sort of dotted across competitions. What is up with that?
Yeah, I don't get that. Especially because I find lutz edges way easier to spot than flip edges. It's really obvious when a lutz is wrong.
I genuinely think it is really difficult to see things in real time. And as skating fans, we have the benefit of multiple broadcast camera angles, and I genuinely don't know why that's not being made available to the tech panel, considering the difference between Olympic medals, as we saw last Olympics, was probably a tech panel call. You know, like these margins are not big margins, most competitions. So it's so crucial for tech panels to get things right. And, you know, these are people who've been sitting in a cold ring judging consistently for hours. Anything that would help them make their lives a little bit easier should be worth the investment. But it just seems like it is not a big concern, and perhaps there are issues with technological capabilities. But I just think it's something that feels so strange that is not being made a top priority.
Yeah, like, as someone who has grown up being forced to watch rugby league my entire life, I do not understand why the tech panel can't use the broadcast footage for reviewing. Because in rugby league, they have a video referee for when the on-pitch referee is feeling lazy or something, I don't know.
Tired, perhaps.
I think it's a try, but we'll go to the video ref. And they will use the broadcast footage from the Sky Sports cameras and review whatever it is that we need to review. And usually you can see on the big screen, and when you're watching on TV, you'll see what they are reviewing as they are reviewing it. And, I mean, the video referee still makes some really stupid calls, but they have a much better look at what is being played on the field and can go backwards and rewind and do whatever they want and zoom in and use different angles because they use the broadcast footage. And I don't understand why figure skating doesn't do something like that.
It's doubly insulting when you see the slow motion of the jump landing and it's clearly under-rotated and then it's like not called.
I think that's what confused me the first time I watched a competition, because they'll do that little thing whilst the skater is in the kiss and cry, where they'll play back some of the elements, and you'll see a big close-up image of the feet as they're landing a jump or taking off.
Yeah.
And you can go, ooh, that was a wrong edge. But then that's not what the tech panel is looking at. And I think because I was thinking of Super League video ref, I thought that was what they were looking at, and then they'll not make the call. So I don't, it just really confuses me that they don't utilize the footage that is there in the rink.
Speaking of, I think probably the hottest topic of tech panel judging in this Challenger series so far is the suspicious as hell under rotation calls on Yuzuru Hanyu's free skate at ACI.
Where were they? At least in the quad toes.
Yeah.
On the quad toes, I have no idea. The quad sal and the quad loop, I would have forgiven them having another look at. But if you go on Twitter, there is no shortage of videos breaking down the tech calls with footage from the event, including from various angles, because we have hundreds of fan cams, and it just really, I don't see it. I don't really get it, and especially given I saw a comparison between Yuzuru's quadruple toe and Kevin's quadruple toe. They pretty much land in the same place. One was called and the other wasn't. And I think it's also doubly strange because usually tech panels review elements that were landed dicily, so like a step out or, you know, it was scratchy landings, but Yuzuru's quad toes were like fine. So I don't really know why they singled those out for review. It's quite unusual, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the tech panel really should be the easiest part of the judging to keep reasonably even across events, but no, it's not. It's not even in one single competition, never mind across competitions, and that just drives me slightly insane. I mean, another thing is that when you're looking at, I mean, you can kind of do this in tech panels as well. You can guess, what nationality was the tech controller, but what you really shouldn't be able to do is look at protocols and guess where each judge was from. I can spot the American or the Canadian with like a 90% accuracy rate.
It's so sad, but so true.
And I think even beyond that, and if we go just straight into the protocols, I get the principle behind the plus and minus 5 GOE system, but like I think we're getting to the point, as Javier pointed out rightfully during Euros last year, where like the range of GOE being awarded on the same elements is getting slightly ridiculous. to the point where I don't really understand how the judges are watching the same programs. Like, as Yogita has said in previous episodes, GOE are meant to be awarded according to how many bullets the skater's element ticks off from a set list, but the lack of transparency about which bullets are being ticked off to award GOE, I think, hurts both the audience and the skater, who has no idea what they need to work on. Because if you get a GOE ranging from 4 to 1 on the same element, I would be so confused as a skater. I'd be like, clearly I need to work on something, but one judge is saying I have 3 things I need to work on, and another judge is saying that I'm pretty much perfect. So which is it? And I think that lack of transparency just really hurts the judging, it hurts the audiences, and like, it's happening with surprising regularity, especially if you look further down in the protocols, like to skaters who are ranking slightly lower. Like, there's such a range. And like Boyang's step sequence ranged from +4 to -3, which I think is currently the record for the biggest freaking range that I've ever seen. Like, it's to the point where I'm sure it was like an error of inputting, much like I think it was Mikhail's like 0.50 in PCS for something last year. But like, even if it was an error, like, how is the interface designed that you could mix up a +3 and a -3? And why isn't it possible to be fixed? These are just questions that keep me up at night.
Just judging keeps me up at night.
Yeah, you can tell how I spend my Saturdays.
Same. Aren't we all the same here?
Yeah.
Indeed. And to an extent, I think it also seems to be happening with PCS. So like Vincent's short program at US Classic, I believe, went from 6 to a 9. So at this point, I'm just throwing my hands up in the air and saying, like, what is even happening anymore?
Yeah, I mean, if we compare, say, Vincent to Junhwan, because they both came up to seniors at the same time, I am not really sure how, like, at ACI and at US Classic, Vincent was the one to get the higher PCS. That makes no sense to me, just based on their skating. I mean, at ACI, Junhwan got 5.25 for transitions off one judge judging his free skate, and he got 6.75 off a judge for transitions and interpretation for his short program, while Vincent was scored comfortably in the 7s and 8s in both programs, with him even getting a 9 in, I think, was it skating skill off the US judge.
It's just like a 5.25 on your 3rd senior season is just like a big we hate you from the judges.
In that free skate, that is a really beautiful free skate, and it blows my mind that they have the audacity to give him a 5.25.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, for me, I think Junhwan is mid to high 7s, low to mid 8s. I think that's about right. He still has stuff to refine. He really does need to work on bringing character to his programs. So, like, his performance interpretation side of things does need work. He kind of snapped a little bit for me at the very beginning of his short program, but then lost it halfway through. So he needs to kind of work on maintaining energy through his programs.
Gina, you're just really fighting for Junhwan rights right here, and I really support you.
Thank you.
And I think it's definitely a case where you just think, like, people say you shouldn't compare scores across competitions, you shouldn't compare that across different judging panels. And I'm like, on one hand, I understand that, like, there are different judges with different standards. But on the other hand, that should not be an excuse in a judged sport with criteria.
It is the same sport. It's the same rules.
The scores count towards the same world standings, the same world records, and the same, like, elements that influence qualification for competitions. So I heavily disagree with anyone who says you can't compare scores across competitions, because I think that defeats the entire point of there being a scoring system. So shout out of the week this week is on costume choices, because there were some and because I say so. So first shout out is on Yuzuru Hanyu's new Origin costume, which met with quite a lot of acclaim. I love it. He looks like a witch who's about to curse me into oblivion, and I am all up for it.
Yes. That is what I want.
Yep.
Second shout out for me is Yelim Kim's Shape of Water-esque Black Swan costume. It is gorgeous and unusual. It's dark. It's got beautiful, like, iridescent green accents.
It's got like the neck thing.
It has the arm things.
Oh my god. Korean ladies' dresses are always great, but like this one was just truly unusual in a dark and dramatic sense, and I love it on her. I said it would look perfect for a Shape of Water-esque program because I think it looks more aquatic than Swan, to be very honest. But hey, I support ladies going for innovation in their costume shape and cut, and I love it.
Also, it looks rad when she does rip-on.
And I also really love that Kaori's Matrix costume references the green computer code line in the beading. I just thought that was such a clever touch.
I didn't notice that until someone pointed it out, and I was like, oh my god, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I just love that. Like, that's one of my favorite aspects of costuming, where like someone takes like a reference, but they don't make it too literal. And it's just beautifully evocative and subtle. Fourth is, we've mentioned this before, but Anna Sherbakova's Firebird costume change. So really loved that transition from blue to that striking red. And yeah, let's hope that she keeps executing that successfully.
Yeah, my shout out goes to Junhwan Cha for recycling an entire costume.
Fingers crossed for more costume delights, but yeah, great job to the skaters that we've mentioned.
Overall, it was a decent Challenger series.
Yep, and we'll see more of it in the coming weeks. But yeah, GP season is upon us. So next time you'll be hearing from us, it'll be... oh my god! Crisis.
Thank you guys for listening, and we really hope you guys come back again for our next episode.
Thank you to our research team for their help with this episode. Thank you to our transcription team and our quality control team. You had a hard job. And thank you to Evie for editing, who also had a hard job. And big thanks to Gabb for her graphic design.
If you want to get in touch with us, then please feel free to contact via our website, inthelowpodcast.com, or on Twitter. You can find our episodes on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. And look out for new photo galleries on our website.
If you enjoyed the show and you want to help support the team, please consider making a donation to us on our Ko-fi page. And we'd love to get a huge thank you to all the listeners who have contributed to our team thus far.
You can find the links to all of our social media pages and our Ko-fi on the website. If you are listening on iTunes, please consider leaving a rating and a review if you enjoyed the show. Thank you for listening. This has been Gina,
Carly,
And Lay. See you soon.
thank you.